Anyway, we move on. So basically now we're at his death. So we're just going to go very briefly over the order of what happened. Then we're going to go back and look at the evidence to see if it's any good. So July the 6th, he's arrested by the FBI for crimes against children. And he's found with all these pictures and the Austrian passport and the diamonds. And 2 days later, he's charged with sex trafficking and trafficking minors. So he's definitely charged with a very, very serious crime at this point. He offers $100 million in bail in return for being allowed to be put on house arrest, but they turn this down. They say absolutely no chance. We're just not going to allow this. On July the 23rd, he's in a cell with Nicholas Tartaglione, the ex-cop bodybuilder, and he claims that he's attacked by this man. Nicholas claims that he actually saved him from killing himself. He's put on suicide watch, and after 6 days, he's taken off. Now, this is not at the request of his lawyer, as James Corbett mistakenly understood. It's because he was assessed by a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist deemed him to be of no threat to himself, which is, again, unusual. Now, according to the protocol of the prison, if you are taken off suicide watch, you should always be left with a cellmate. Basically as a sort of deterrent to you killing yourself again, and you should be checked on every 30 minutes. Now, evidently, neither of these things happened. The two guards who were looking after him, one of them wasn't even a guard. Both of them were doing overtime, so they were absolutely exhausted. One of them wasn't even a guard. They'd been drafted in from another part of the prison just to sort of fill the gaps, and both of them fell asleep. This wouldn't have mattered because essentially the CCTV outside the cell failed for a second time, not just one, but two cameras showing the corridor and the door outside Epstein's cell. And on the morning of August the 10th, he's found dead. Now, initially, it's thought that he's thrown himself off the top bunk because he's got fractures in the bones in his neck. Later, the autopsy comes back towards the end of October, saying that he actually knelt down in front of and basically just leant forward and broke his neck. And there are two prominent pathologists that disagree with this. One is Michael Baden, who we admit is problematic because of the connection to JFK, and even James Corbett acknowledges that basically he seems to be open to interpretation depending on who's paying for him. For example, he stuck up for O.J. Simpson by coming up with some spurious nonsense about there's no way that he didn't get blood on his shoes, which showed that he was sat down when he was attacked. It's something nonsense that he later retracted and basically said almost ruined his career. He also stuck up for Phil Spector, who, if you remember, shot the face off of an aspiring Hollywood actress. And Michael Baden in the court forgot to let people know, it just slipped his mind, completely forgot to let people know this conflict of interest, that his wife was the lawyer for Phil Spector. Just forgot that, completely forgot that. But there was another person that came out and said, well, this is impossible. If he's leant forward, there's no way he could have killed himself like that. There wouldn't be sufficient pressure to strangle himself and certainly fracture the bones. And that was a pathologist called Cyril Wecht. Now, Cyril Wecht has a larger degree of authority in this field. He's the person that actually opposed the Warren Commission. And one of the most famous things that he found out was that during the investigation into the assassination of JFK, the authorities lost JFK's brain. They lost it, so it couldn't be examined to see which angle the bullets came out. And Cyril Wecht was the person that actually sort of brought that to prominence. So that is certainly very interesting. And there are at least 5 other massive inconsistencies within Jeffrey Epstein's death. One, the wounds were inconsistent with the ligature found on the cell. The wound was in the center of the neck. What Baden says and Wecht sort of goes along with is that should have slipped up and actually been directly under his neck, and that the breakages in the fractures in the bones are more consistent with strangulation, as is the hemorrhaging of their eyes. And this is more sort of common with suicide. He also says that there's no blood. There's blood on the neck, but there's none on the noose. Now, there is a good reason for that that we'll come on to, because no photos were actually taken of where the body was found. Nobody is quite sure whether he hung himself from the top bunk or the bottom bunk. And actually, there's a television program called Surviving Jeffrey Epstein, which seems to show a portion of noose or blankets tied to a grid that is in the side of the wall, which would actually be far more plausible. But nobody knows where he hung himself from. Nobody knows where the body was found, because the guards didn't take a photo and destroyed evidence straight away, because they woke up, went down there, and they ran in screaming and shouting, "Oh my God, he's dead!" Started immediately pounding on his chest, going, "Breathe, Epstein, breathe, please breathe," because they realized that they'd really, really messed up. But basically, they've destroyed evidence in this attempt. The noose that was shown to the inquiry, which is the one that basically is listed and is still in evidence as the suicide tool, wasn't the device that was used to kill him. How do we know this? Because, well, two things: there was no blood transferred onto the noose, and the noose was neatly folded. The noose that was used around his neck, they had to cut in order to get it off of his throat and off the support. So it very much looks like the authorities tested the wrong noose.
This is weird.
And they didn't test either of them for DNA, which would eliminate potentially the idea that there being somebody else there. And again, it's not clear why the initial autopsy findings were changed from pending study to suicide, because no new evidence was presented. The only new evidence that was presented was the idea that he might have tried to commit suicide on July the 22nd. But that wasn't sufficient for him to be kept on suicide watch, but it was considered sufficient evidence to point to the fact that he might have had suicidal ideations in the later autopsy. And also the autopsy changed from saying that he threw himself off the top bunk to saying that he simply kneeled down in front of the second bunk. So there are discrepancies. There are incredible discrepancies. So what I've come to with this is that we don't know the details of the suicide, and the official story of the suicide would almost certainly be wrong. But that doesn't mean that he didn't commit suicide, because if we believe the other ideas, somebody would have to get into the cell to be ordered to kill him. Now, I've been putting it to people and saying, well, there's no evidence that anyone got into the cell. And everybody has said to me, well, that's because they covered it up so well. They destroyed the CCTV footage so that nobody could see them get in there. They made sure he was on his own. They made it look like he was potentially suicidal and had the opportunity to commit suicide, and they murdered him. The reason there's no evidence of foul play, other than the discrepancies, is that they were very, very good at their job. Potentially, because there is a 3-hour gap. But in order to do that, you've got to, first off, who's killed him? And why? Because there's all this speculation, but nobody's actually said, well, it was definitely this person because of definitely this, because it was going to expose that.
It's Mossad.
Well,
It's Mossad.
Potentially, that is one of the sort of things that people say. And there's, as we're going to come on to, there's a lot of evidence that basically suggests that he could have been connected to intelligence agencies that we've been mentioning throughout the thing. But again, there's no proof of it. It's pure speculation, and it's a possibility. But if we're speculating, it could be that Dr. Sam Beckett leapt into his body from the future in order to make himself kill himself, in order to prevent some horrific thing that thankfully him, Sam, and Ziggy have avoided, and so that's now on a different timeline.
Oh boy.
Exactly. This is the problem with speculation. Again, I still think it looks fishy as hell. It really does look fishy, and I think there's enough foul-ups, errors, and inconsistencies in the way that's reported for people to be suspicious. But I also have to admit, if we take it as read that he didn't commit suicide, which we don't know who did it, how they did it, why they did it, when they did it, how they got away with it, there's just a gap that we can project our own speculation onto. And that, I don't know about it, to be quite honest. So personally, and don't worry, we're still going to go over like Alex Jones and etc., etc., etc. But personally, I've gone from thinking it was definitely murder to I don't know. I honestly don't know anymore.
And things like this, I have a strong belief in half-assery. Like, look, they had to pull in a random guy from somewhere else in the prison to fill in for a guard shift, and there was already a guard, doing overtime, and Like, that to start with is a good sign of half-assery, right? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and the fact that cameras are breaking down, like, there's always these things in these claims. There's always these curious issues with stories like this, with events like this. Like, okay, so two of the cameras weren't working. You're like, okay, but how long were they not working? And
Yes.
how many other cameras weren't working?
Precisely.
Because if it's only those two cameras,
Then it's sus.
yeah,
Yeah. But is that indicative of a very poorly run and underfunded prison system?
which seems pretty plausible.
Yeah. Now the sleeping thing as well, the fact that these guys were both sleeping, it is a colossal balls up.
As one man and one woman.
Oh, was
Was
it?
it?
Yeah.
Ah.
And they were both sleeping or on their devices or whatever and just not paying attention. Now that sounds kind of far fetched. However, I have a friend, right? One of my best friends. He used to work at McDonald's when he was a teenager. And he always used to arrive late. His shift started at 10. He used to roll in at about 10:30. And the first thing that he would do every single shift that he worked there would go upstairs to the stock cupboard. The stock cupboard door opened inwards. So he'd go in there, he'd lean up against the door, and he'd go back to sleep. And usually about 12 o'clock, somebody would come looking for him, open the stock cupboard door, knock his back, and he'd go, whoa, 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 I'm in here getting some stock. At which point he would protest that he'd been working all the time. He certainly hadn't been sleeping in the stock cupboard. Only a maniac would do something like that. So I have heard stranger things, basically. But again, it all boils back to, and I think you're right, I think the incompetence thing could well be the thing, but there shouldn't have been that level of incompetence with such an important person.
No, of course not. But at the same time, like, there shouldn't be the level of incompetence that there is in just an astonishing number of things that go on around us every day.
Well, this is true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very true.
I don't know.
I'd reckon they're quite lackadaisical, as there hadn't been a suicide for 14 years there. So, but if you're not used to that happening often, and it's not something that you're looking out for, you kind of just, especially these guards that were there that night. It seems like they were just
Yeah,
they filled in everything, but they also know that these people filled in these forms
Yeah.
every shift.
yeah.
They did it
Mm.
all the time. They didn't do their searches at all.
Yeah, and there's that thing, like, I don't know, like, I've never worked as a prison guard, but I've certainly worked in jobs with people who've completely fucked about with their work, just,
Yeah.
Yep.
bullshit their timesheets and
Mm-hmm.
say they did things they didn't do and pass things off to other people, like, and it's not like those are particularly well paid jobs.
Oh, I've done it. My old job, I used to spend literally hours hiding in the toilet cubicles thinking this is disgusting. But it's preferable to. That's how much I hate my job.
Yeah.
That I'll sit here and put up with this rather than actually do the thing that they're paying me to do.
I used to have an app on my phone that you could you put in your salary and you put in the number of hours you work, and
Mm.
then every time you go to the toilet, you click the start button, and then when you're finished, you click the stop button, and it tells you how much you earned while you were taking a shit.
Oh, excellent. Oh, you see, that would have been very dangerous. Like that's the perfect way to get back at the system. But
Yeah.
hey
So
ho,
I don't have trouble believing that guards who were working overtime
we're
in the middle of the
incompetent.
night
Yeah.
fell asleep. Like, have you ever done like overnight stuff?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's easy to start drifting off.
Oh yeah.
Feel your eyelids getting heavy.
And not do my hourly checks. I used to do security at a hotel overnight, and there like sometimes I filled in the sheets where I didn't go down and check the fire doors for 3 hours or something. I was supposed to do it every hour.
Yeah. And you look at the modern technology they use now, right? Like the security companies, places where I've worked now, they have like a little RFID tag they stick on every
Mhm.
door, and they have an app on their phone. They have to go around and they have to tap the RFID tag on
Yeah.
every door to prove they've been there. But no, that's not how it used to
Well,
work.
yeah, that actually got me sacked from a job again. So this feeds into both those points: the RFID thing and the laziness. I was working at a power station in Nottingham, and they just told me file all this, and I was like, well, I don't know what's needs filing and what doesn't. So it was just a DOS subject. About 6 months later, I got pulled into the office and summarily let go because they checked my swiping times and discovered that I was turning up about 10 and starting off about 1 most days. And I didn't realise that it was all recorded. So hey ho, but I got 6 months out of them. So it is what it is. So anyway, going on to, like, say, for example, Stephen Crowder, the premise of his is based on the Michael Baden idea, the idea that basically there would not be enough pressure in order to fracture those bones. This is debated. You've got Michael Baden, who's a bit dodgy in his sort of things. You've got Cyril Wecht, who I'd be more inclined to believe. But the problem is that although they both say that this is more common in murder than suicide, it's not unheard of in suicide. Although Michael Baden says, I've never seen 3 breaks of this type in all the prison suicides that I've ever seen, particularly as you get older. And, he was no spring chicken, Epstein. It is possible that you could break those bones, or fracture those bones. So again, the idea that this is a smoking gun isn't really there. The thing about, say, the Stephen Crowder thing is that basically he's just trying to sort of put forward the idea that there's something suspicious about it. Like, I'd be all for Stephen Crowder trying that experiment again under sort of more scientific details, really go for broke this time, properly see if you can break your neck. And, because it's what we want to find out. Science, exactly. But this is the thing, it's not quite as cut and dry as people would make out. So it's a difficult one, because, to say, I thought all those things were smoking guns, and it is a lot of coincidence and a lot of incompetencies. But again, there's no actual proof pointing towards the other sort of way.
It's interesting the way that you describe the position that he apparently took, because I had always assumed, I say always assumed, but my assumption had been that he had tied a, what do you want to call it, a noose or a cord, or whatever you want to call it, around his neck, and then essentially sat down, rather than kneeling and leaning forward, because that makes more sense to me about how to leverage, your body weight in this situation. But that's apparent. You're saying that's not what took place. So that was the assumption I'd had.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, originally they said that he must have sat on the top bunk and sort of thrown himself off with a noose attached around his neck. Later, they changed it to, they think he tied it to the bottom bunk and kneeled forward so that his body weight sort of. Now, the other thing is, and I don't know the answer to this, but could it have been that he killed himself? And I'm just speculating, playing devil's advocate here. Killed himself, and then as he was dead and the dead weight shifted, could he not have shifted in such a way that then fractured these bones? I simply don't know.
I would assume so.
Yeah, that's more like it for me.
The other thing about the fractures, though, is, right, like anything like that, like, shit happens differently all the time.
Yeah.
And, like, just because you haven't seen a thing happen before definitely doesn't mean it can't happen. Like, like.
Well, as I say, it was Michael Baden that was saying that basically these are sort of, they indicate strangulation. But there's been numerous people. Barbara Sampson, basically, she's the person that did the autopsy. She stands by her verdict, and she says that yes, although it's less common, it's not actually unheard of for these fractures. And then you've got other people. There's a neurosurgeon called Sanjay Gupta that basically says actually they've dealt with lots of suicides and they see these types of fractures all the time. Who is accurate, I don't know. But the point being is that I think you can find somebody from either side of the argument to make that statement, and it's just not conclusive.
While you were talking about it before, I looked up a study. I saw a couple of studies, but I looked one up that studied suicides and strangulation deaths in Thailand, and found that 25% of the suicides that were included in the study showed the same fracture of the thyroid bone.
Well, there you go then.
Yeah, but there's other studies as well that say all sorts of things. But I mean, it's definitely not unheard of, and it's definitely not a smoking gun.
Totally. So that sort of debunks the Michael Baden thing, really. So the problem is that basically, like, although he says that this is very sort of significant, there are other equally qualified people who don't have the sort of financial motivation to potentially twist the truth, who say the complete opposite. He's got a track record of twisting the truth for money. So unfortunately, that just isn't conclusive anymore. Now, again, to be honest, the Corbett stuff, he's basically just sort of going through the whole thing. He himself suggested that Michael Baden wasn't quite as much of a smoking gun as it might be. He himself debunks the 4chan stuff. He himself says that he definitely thinks that's Epstein's corpse. But he brings up the things about being taken off suicide watch, but he gets that incorrect because at the time the information was limited. It was by a psychiatrist. Again, I think that is rather fishy. But what strikes me is that basically Epstein has manipulated, potentially even greased some palms to get in a cell on his own, I think.
I reckon.
I think what the staff suspected was that neither thing was true. They didn't think that Tartaglione had tried to attack him. They felt that he'd faked a suicide attempt in order to be put like in a cell on his own, or to basically get some attention or whatever. So, but that kind of goes against the concept that he was suicidal later. So it's very, say, there's still no cut and dry. Apparently he had said to his brother and his lawyers that he would see them later. Apparently he was looking forward to his bail hearing because he felt that he could get off. But at the same time, that's the time when all these documents are being made public. And, you know, you don't know if you're left on your own for a certain amount of time. Who knows? As a master manipulator, he might have felt that by killing himself, he was in some way winning because he didn't reveal the secrets to people. So again, it's very strange. Apparently, the person that examined him and put him on took him off suicide watch was a doctoral level psychologist. Now, there was an interesting quote from that report. In it, Epstein said, "I won't kill myself. I'm a coward. I don't like pain. I won't do that." So again, there is something strange that's going off there in as much as that. Having said that, if you were determined to kill yourself, the last thing that you would do would be tell people, "I'm going to kill myself," because then they would prevent you from killing yourself.
Yeah.
So it's
that's typically the thing.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that Corbett points out that he'd heard was that Nicholas Tartaglione was caught with a cell phone, and what he implied from this was that potentially he'd got the call to make the hit or whatever. Well, it transpires that it was taken off of him before Jeffrey Epstein was placed in prison. He was found with it on July the 3rd, and so he'd already had it taken off of him. He claims that it was just given to him by another inmate that was being searched. We'll never know the answer to that one, basically. But again, it is very strange that the CCTV was destroyed. But again, that's the thing is the CCTV was outside the cell. There's no CCTV footage inside any of the cells. So again, that was sort of how I always assumed that it was, that basically, oh, well, we'll know what's happened because we'll be able to see it. That's not true. For whatever reasons, the cameras are just on the outside of the cell. So unless they showed somebody going in and out of the cell, they wouldn't reveal anything. And even if they did show somebody going in and out of the cell, if you want to be completely accurate, that wouldn't necessarily mean that that person killed Epstein.
No.
And we've all watched enough heist movies to know that even if you had video that doesn't show people going in and out, doesn't mean they didn't. So
precisely, this is a bit strange, really. So right, okay, so Alex Jones, this is the last one. On the day that Epstein's death is announced, Trump basically tweets Clinton body count. And this is connected to a number of things. One, the death of Vince Foster. But basically, there's this concept that the Clintons are basically going around murdering people en masse. But what it was Alex Jones and InfoWars were doing, where they were trying to link it explicitly to Pizzagate. And they'd worked up this ridiculous theory that this pizza place was trafficking children, prostituting children to members of the Democratic Party who would go to this pizza place for their orgies, and it was somehow connected to Haiti and the WikiLeaks and Jeffrey Epstein and blah, blah, blah. And this is all nonsense, basically. There was a video that was supposedly came out called Frazzle Drip. And in this video, it's supposed to show this little girl that's been molested and then mutilated by Aberdeen and Hillary Clinton. And there's one major flaw with this footage is that it's not, well, I mean, it's real. It's a death metal album front cover. It's taken from a death metal album. It's actually a picture of an American lady that was attacked by her own pit bull dog in the late 80s, early 90s. And so you can find this, and it was used by a very sort of gore-heavy death metal band as their album cover. And that's the thing that is the evidence in Frazzle Drip, apparently. But we'll come on to that. So basically, Alex Jones is doing the whole thing. He was murdered. There's an ongoing cover up, and that is unraveling. And to be fair to Alex Jones, just because of the discrepancies that we've seen, you can see why he might think that. But at the same time, you've got to understand that basically he's got some housekeeping to do, because all of a sudden he's aligning himself with Trump, specifically the Trump presidential campaign, and they're trying to smear the Clintons. That's entirely what the point of Pizzagate was. And, you know, the things that he said, they're true. Like, you know, the autopsy does say that his neck was broken. There are deepening questions around his death. The quote, injury is more common with victims of strangulation than hanging. Now, we've discussed that, so we realise that it's not actually as cut and dry as that. But then also, Alex points out that he was given a sweetheart deal in 2008, which is true.
Yep.
But then what he does is he lies, and he says that this was linked between him to the Clintons and Obama and Haiti. And again, this is all tied together. Pizzagate was connected to, apparently off the back of these WikiLeaks, which were called the Podesta emails. Now, the actual thing that was in the Podesta emails was a discussion that showed that the Democratic Party had gone against the views and wishes of their members, and they decided to run with Hillary Clinton as the candidate, despite the fact that Bernie Sanders was more popular. And what the Clintons had done in order to bolster that was they'd put adverts in conservative newspapers attacking Bernie Sanders. But further to that, what they'd also done is they'd put, and this is illegal, put adverts in conservative magazines and publications suggesting and promoting Donald Trump to be the candidate. Why? Why? Because Hillary Clinton thought Donald Trump was a buffoon, and she would easily beat him because he's politically illiterate.
Oh my God! Well, that backfired.
Well, it did, because Robert Mercer of Cambridge Analytica, who at that point was backing Ted Cruz, decided can't buy this type of publicity. She's actually stoked up anger against middle America, so to speak, who think that Trump is clever guy or whatever. She's essentially calling them deplorables and idiots and whatnot. And it totally backfired, as you say. But that was what was in the WikiLeaks. The only thing that connected the Clintons in the WikiLeaks was that it was discovered that in the early 2000s, Jeffrey Epstein had actually paid $50,000 to the Clinton
Foundation.
That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you very much. But he'd given money to loads of people, and loads of people had given money to the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to do guilt by association, this is exactly the time that he was knocking about with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump was praising him in publications. So that's a little bit weak.
Rich people give money to charitable causes. Rich people fly on private planes, and rich people have address books full of other people's names.
Yeah, no, absolutely, precisely. Now, again, so the Haiti and Obama thing is just all nonsense. The rest of the stuff we know about. He points out that he was put in with this cop. Now, he makes a big deal, and people have made a big deal that Tartaglione strangled somebody, implying that that's like his kick, that he just, that's his signature finishing move or whatever. Like, apparently he did strangle one person. He shot 3 of them, and he strangled one person. He did it with a zip tie.
Oh.
Yeah. Isn't it? Like, I mean, there's no denying that this bloke is not somebody that you'd want to... Mate, I'm ever so sorry. I've just spilt my pint on your bird, who I inadvertently called fat. That is not a situation that you'd ever want to find yourself in,
No,
right?
no.
But again, it's certainly not as strong evidence as they say. And then basically Alex says that, well, the good guards, they caught him trying to be murdered, and then they were taken off shift, and these bad guards were put in, and they allowed the murder to happen, which is pretty unfair on those guards, really.
He always has the best sources too. It's amazing how many inside sources he's got who will call him.
He knows people in the CIA and stuff, you know.
Yeah, well, he had FBI sources from the Las Vegas shooting who were telling him all sorts of stuff as well. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
He's got all the best sources.
I loved that. That's possibly the best footage that I've seen of him interacting with poor Joseph Watson.
Yeah.
Where he blatantly lies and says, I've got all these FBI and CIA contracts. You do believe me, Paul? Anyway, I'm going to go off air for the next half an hour. So, Paul, you back up all the bullshit that I've just said. And it was shortly after that poor Joseph Watson left InfoWars. But yeah, he just totally leaves him in the loop there. Brilliant.
Didn't he literally say he was going to rip up the pages that it was written on as well? I think that was
something is just nonsense. The other thing is that basically this guy, Nick Tartaglione, he claims that he actually saved Epstein's life. We'll never know the answers for that. But, if there was a lot of evidence that suggested that they could pin it on him, why would they not pin it on him? If this is a cover-up, a murder, you've got the suspect there.
It's much better to have a scapegoat.
Isn't it just? You could say that. You could even throw these guards under the bus.
Yep.
Or whatever. You could do anything, but they haven't chose to do that. Which, again, it's not proof of anything. It's pure speculation. But yeah. And again, the camera malfunctioning and then being found and then being lost. It's slapdash at best. It's suspicious. It really is dodgy. So let's go over these inconsistencies, right? Okay, that were listed in Judge Report. Epstein said that he would cooperate and begin naming names. That's a flat-out lie. That's a complete lie. At no point did he say anything even approaching that. He just kept stum. He wasn't going to name anybody. He was found unconscious 3 weeks earlier. That's true. Documents implicating top Democrats came out. Kind of. They were publicized. This was the Virginia Giuffre case. And these names have been floating around prior to this, if you knew where to look. Yes, it's damaging. It's incredibly damaging, and it's bolstering the case. But it's not anything that Epstein wouldn't have heard of before. So I don't know about that. Taken off suicide watch, yes, that's true. Isolated, which is strange for a suicidal, yes, that is true. Supposed to have a cellmate. Camera malfunctioning, guards not doing the rounds, guards working extra shifts, not being a certified guards, not checking, falling asleep, and not checking for 3 hours. All of that is cagey as hell. Absolutely cagey as hell. But if you're doing Occam's razor, the simplest explanation is they fell asleep and didn't check.
Yeah.
Also, the whole place was just being underfunded and
crap.
And
yeah,
full of shit.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you see that indicating the fact that people are doing jobs that they're not supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And you've got multiple instances of failures of cameras. It's probably more indicative of that thing. Otherwise, I mean, again, I'm totally open to the possibility that these guards snuck somebody in, made sure that the CCTV failed, got him into Epstein's cell, managed to murder Epstein without the people in the adjoining cells hearing anything happening, and then got this person back out, and then were able to fabricate the entire thing to make it look like it was a complete and total balls up. In fact, there was actually somebody who much later came out and said that he was in the cell next to him, and he heard Epstein pacing around, chuntering to himself, obviously in a bad way, and he believes very strongly that he committed suicide. Now, naysayers will say he's been paid to say that, or he doesn't exist, or whatever. So again, this is the problem, is that basically, if we're dealing only with things that we know, not speculation or plausibilities, we've got no evidence of that at all.
There's an aspect of this that also reminds me of a lot of other conspiracy stuff, which is that the theory about what may have happened is so much more complicated than necessary.
Yes.
Like if you imagine they've snuck an extra person they've snuck someone in a van, they've brought someone in through multiple guards, they've had to go through prisoners who could see things happening. All of these chances, multiple chances of things going wrong or people discovering the plot. Whereas they've got him in a cell and they provide him 3 meals a day and everything he drinks. Like if you wanted him secretly dead, that wouldn't be complicated.
This is true. This is all true. But this is the problem with the case, is that you've got so limited facts that basically you tend to want to fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
And again, it's plausible. I'm still saying it's plausible, but there's no evidence of it, and that is the important distinction. So the main thing that Alex Jones rants on about, right? Okay, is that the guards were saying that they heard him screaming and begging for his life. And that basically the guards were saying, "Breathe, Epstein, breathe," as almost taunting him and covering up his gurgling death throes. Now, I found the source of this because this is often the best thing to do, is find the source of this. It's a CBS News report on the day that he was found. Okay. And Alex Jones has, can you believe, completely misrepresented the facts of what the article says. Was there screaming and hollering coming from the room? Yes, there was. Who was it? It was the guards. The guards found him and immediately went into a panic. And them shouting, breathe, breathe, is them panicking, realizing that they're probably going to be liable for this bloke's death because they were supposed to be looking after him, trying to get him to, come back to life. It's nonsense. And if that is the strongest thing that Alex Jones has got, which he labours that point time and time again, he has completely misrepresented that point, which is a complete. Right, here, this is where I got the 40 years, because apparently Drudge report says it was no suicide in the facility for 40 years. But so I don't know whether that's 14, 40, or I've misheard or whatever. But anyway, as you astutely pointed out, Brent, that means that people will probably be rather lax about the possibility of someone even attempting it. So that doesn't actually bolster the case. In fact, it more sort of gives him an opportunity to do it. His cellmate is a murderer. Yeah, kind of. We know that. But again, there's no actual proof. Epstein had dirt on global elites that he was going to let out.
Maybe.
Well, this is tied back again. The source of that is the 2018 article that he gave with the New York magazine, where he said that he had dirt on Silicon Valley tech heads. I know the drugs and sex and stuff like that. That's it. Yeah. That's the dirt that he had that Alex Jones is referencing. Did he have other stuff? Yeah, very, very possibly, very, very potentially. A lot of indication is towards that that's what he was doing for whatever reason. But there's no evidence. No one's found a tape. There's the Ghislaine confession, or the quasi-confession, tacit confession. But again, Jones is framing this in such a way that is disingenuous, basically. He had the sheets that were given to hang himself. See, these two contradict themselves, basically. He was not given paper sheets when he should have been, but he was given sheets to hang himself. Well, that gives him the opportunity, and I've just found it here.
Yeah, did he hang himself or did he get murdered? But also, that's that thing. There's a thing there, he should have been given paper sheets. I'm like, it's kind of like the security camera's not working. Why? Is that a thing that normally happens? Or are we just thinking that would have been a better option? Because that may be true.
Well, again, the thing is that basically he had other things in the cell that he could have killed himself with as well. So, there's a sleep apnea machine in there. Who that was for, I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, it comes across more as incompetence rather than a setup, really. I mean, you could make the inference that maybe he's been told you need to kill yourself, otherwise somebody will do it for you or something like that. And he's potentially had the opportunity to do that. But again, it's pure speculation.
Yeah, maybe that's what the situation with the other prisoner was about. Maybe that was.
Yeah.
That would. Sure, I could believe that.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, then Jones says the evidence points to murder because he had this little black book. Now, we've discussed the little black book. Again, I'd love it to be smoking gun proof of something really, really horrific, but it just isn't. It's an address book. Alex Jones gone to say he was a pimp. I could believe that, or certainly not necessarily pimp full time. This isn't his job. This is the thing, right? Okay.
Yeah, it's a hobby.
We were discussing this the other day. Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Is he somebody that can procure girls and has the access to girls that could potentially blackmail people? Yeah, but that's not how he makes his money. He's making his money in stock and certain eugenics firms and stuff like that, and property, and working for other people. He's not making his money, so he's not a pimp in that sense. Has he, again, used this to blackmail people? There's a certain amount of evidence that suggests, yeah, potentially he has. In New York, they do drugs, have rituals. It's all about eugenics and trauma-based mind control. That's just Alex Jones just ticking all the boxes so that the listeners are interested. There's an element of truth in it, in as much as basically sometimes young girls are used in that type of thing, historically connected to CIA declassified documents, and Epstein was involved to a degree with eugenics companies, which we'll come on to in a minute. The drugs, no idea. The rituals, no, there's no evidence of any rituals or anything like that. That's just Alex Jones, basically. He then goes on again about the screaming and begging, howling for his life. And then he says that the list came out that showed that loads of top Democrats and royalty, and implies that Clinton was part of his sex ring. Again, it's not true. It showed that they'd given $50,000 to the foundation. and that was it. They basically tried to link the Wiener guy that had sexted that little girl. They tried to connect that with Hillary Clinton and Pizzagate and Epstein and Frazzledrip and pretend that the whole thing was one big connected thing that just so happened to align with QAnon, which at the time Alex Jones was promoting because he said that he knew who Q was. So again, it's all just nonsense and bullshit that they've mashed together, which actually sort of denigrates the sort of real disparities in the case, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
He was worried that he would be murdered. This is, again, there's an element of truth to this. He told his brother, Mark Epstein, that his life might be in danger. But Mark said that I could see that if he got a life sentence, he might kill himself. But he had a bail hearing coming up. And his lawyer said, we did not see a despairing, despondent, suicidal person. Having said that, the mind is a horrible and thing sometimes. People who were very, very depressed and very, very anxious and downcast often project the most public persona of being happy in order to sort of protect others, and so they don't have to talk about it. Because it's very, very difficult to sort of go through emotions like that. So again,
it's very common for friends and family to not see it coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So and again, you've got to appreciate that Mark Epstein, Jeff Epstein's clearly a monster, but he's still his brother, and he'll be searching for answers at this point, looking for an explanation.
Yeah.
I mean, more than that, also, though, there might be financial reasons why Jeffrey Epstein's relatives would not want him to have committed suicide.
Yeah.
Insurance
True.
something like that. So,
some people, it's not my personal belief or whatever, but some people would be very embarrassed by that, like the fact that it would be considered, say, weak in a toxic masculinity type way. So again, this is the thing we're talking about. This again is like when you remove all the impossibilities, whatever's left, however improbable, is the answer, which is bollocks, because that's not how you do investigation. It's a literary device. But again, we've just shown there that we don't know all the improbabilities. We don't know what the conversations were that he was having. We don't know what was going through his mind or what he thought might come out. Like, we know what we know. There could be a whole layer of other stuff that's even more horrific that he was desperate not to be associated with. Alex says that basically people were filming Epstein's Island with drones and they could see that banks of computers were being taken away and stuff like that. Now, I don't know what to make of this. It's entirely plausible because he did have that before with that model Adriana Ross. The problem is that the drone footage that Alex Jones shows clearly shows FBI agents wandering around on in the property. So could it be that they took away the computers?
They have been known to do that.
Exactly. Now, it could be that basically there was a cover-up. I mean, what a lot of people say is there's a meme, Ghislaine, only person in the world that's been convicted of trafficking, but there's no clients. Well, that's not strictly true. If you actually look at the details of those charges against her and against Epstein, the girls were trafficked for Epstein. Traffic means taking either from abroad or over state lines, or just basically just transporting for the purposes of illicit sex and or prostitution. So the trafficking list was him and Ghislaine. The list that people talk about is the people that Virginia Roberts has spoken to. And sometimes also people mistake the little black book for a list, but it isn't. So there isn't really a list that exists. There may well be some clients and stuff like that, but this idea that there's a physical document that has been sealed might exist, but there's no evidence that we know that it exists. And so that's where some of the confusion over this comes. Doesn't make any of it any better. Obviously, it's ridiculous and it's evil. It's just pure evil, particularly from Ghislaine, who was the manipulative part of it. And I hate to sound just a mansplain, so to speak, but as a woman, she must understand how hurtful and how destructive that must have been for these young girls. And I mean, as a man, you can understand that, but like, come on, do you know what I mean? It shows another level of callousness to my mind, basically. Anyway, Alex finishes on a complete doozy here by saying that basically the reason he trusts Trump's is because he's vetted him, and there's absolutely no connection or suggestion of paedophilia. And he's also done research and shows that there's absolutely no connection between Epstein and Trump. And this is bullshit, as we well know.
Yeah, as you've plainly laid out.
But it gets worse than that. Does Trump know any people that might have been accused of paedophilia? Because Alex Jones has done his research. Well, aside from Epstein, it transpires that yes, he does. He knows quite a few, including his good friend George Nader. George Nader in 1985, so when Trump knew him, got child porn imported to him from Holland. Now, this was actually dismissed as a case due to an invalid warrant. But in 1991, he served 6 months for buying child pornography from Germany that he got posted to him. In 2003, George Nader was sentenced to a year for abusing 10 boys, 10 underage boys. And he only got a year for that, which was very, very lucky. In 2018, George Nader, the friend of Donald Trump, child porn was found on his phone as part of the Mueller investigation. If you remember when Donald Trump was being impeached, child porn was found on his phone. And it was proven that in 2019, he transported a 14-year-old boy to Washington from Europe for the purposes of sex. And in 2020, he pled guilty to child porn, transporting a minor, and got 10 years. So that's one friend of Donald Trump that has, we can say, connections to paedophilia. Roy Cohn, the lawyer who was Donald Trump's mentor, was known to enjoy the company of, shall we say, beautiful young boys, often in a very drugged up state inside places like Studio 54, which is a club in New York. But he was also providing legal protection for a paedophile ring that operated out of Suite 233 at the Plaza Hotel, New York. An investigative journalist, John Klotz, wrote that the ring had connections to the intelligence agency. So that's 2 people that Donald Trump knows. The third person was Tevfik Arif. Now, Tevfik Arif was raided by the FBI for smuggling underage girls into Turkey for the purposes of prostitution. How did he do this? He did it through a modeling agency by not providing them with a work visa, which you'll remember is exactly the same thing that Donald Trump was later accused of doing. And the final person was John Casablancas, known for relationships with extremely young girls, accused of sexual assault and trafficking girls, molested 15-year-old Stephanie Seymour and married a 17-year-old when he was 50. And if you remember, this person was good friends with Donald Trump. They used to look up models' skirts together, and he was the manager of Donald Trump's 13-year-old daughter. So I'm going to be honest, I don't think Alex Jones has quite done his due diligence on that one.
No. There's a few connections there.
Yeah, absolutely. So he then says that Epstein was involved in human ritual sacrifice. I've been saying this for 10 years. No, he hasn't been saying that for 10 years. And no, there's no evidence to support the idea that Epstein was involved in murder at all, let alone ritual human sacrifice. Now, on the next one, basically, he goes on about he boasts about having broken the story, and he says that basically he broke it in 1999. No, he didn't break it in 1999, okay, because nobody knew about Epstein until at least 2008. That was, well, I suppose the Vanity Fair people found out about it in 2003, but that was just rumors that he'd raped a couple of girls. There was no implication that he was involved in any sort of broader blackmail ring or anything that might be connected to intelligence services or to royalty at that point. Nobody knew. So literally nobody knew. But he says, I knew about Epstein because 20 years ago there was these articles about this group of billionaires, yada, 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 saving the world from overpopulation. I had a look for any connection between Warren Buffett, Ted Turner, or Oprah Winfrey and Jeffrey Epstein, and I could not find a single thing. It doesn't mean that basically there might not be some. It means that if Alex Jones has got a source for this, rather than just trying to smear people who he considers political opponents of the person he's, let's not forget, financed to promote, then I can't find it, basically. So, and here's the strange thing. When he talks about Jeffrey Epstein and eugenics, that's true. What Jeffrey Epstein had done is in the early 2000s, he'd set up a ranch in Mexico, and he never actually got around to doing this. But what he's hoped to do was to populate it with a load of women and create a baby farm where he would use his own sperm to impregnate these hundreds of women to produce genetically perfect human beings.
This is fucking weird.
Now, that is unusual belief, isn't it? A fringe interest. I'll certainly go along with that. So weirdly, Alex Jones is actually sort of kind of telling the truth with that to a degree, and that's the most bizarre aspect of it. What he fails to mention is this was done in the early 2000s. It never came to fruition, and this was done at a time when Jeffrey Epstein was actually friends with Donald Trump. So it's very, very, very confusing, basically. So the final bit is basically Alex Jones desperately trying to say that he never promoted Pizzagate, which we don't even need to go into that. We know that's a lie. He's desperately sort of backtracking and trying to rewrite history and try to explain himself in a way that makes him look less like the sort of person that would encourage somebody to take a machine gun to a family eatery as part of a stochastic terrorism plot. Anyway, the one thing that he does talk about is Amy Robach. Now, she is the ABC reporter, and they show that clip from Project Veritas where she's saying, this is ridiculous. I had this story for 3 years, tried to get it out to no avail, and these revelations, I freaking had all of it. I had Clinton, I had the lot. Now, this is true, but there is a very good reason for this. After that, she basically said, oh, yeah, no, I understood why we couldn't show it. I was upset that an important interview I'd conducted with Virginia Roberts didn't air because we couldn't obtain sufficient corroborating evidence to meet ABC's editorial standards about her allegations. What had happened is, this is in the time when Virginia Roberts had brought the lawsuit, and in it, she'd said that she was not only raped by Epstein, but she was handed around to other people, including Prince Andrew, Alan Dershowitz, and those two, the MIT scientist and those two Democrats. The problem was that in the lawsuit, the district judge, Kenneth Mara, said, you can't introduce that into the lawsuit. Because you've got no evidence of it, although we believe you, you cannot put that in the lawsuit. The lawsuit must only be against Jeffrey Epstein. If you want to bring separate lawsuits against those people, that's fine. But you can't smear them without evidence. And so because of that, they couldn't conduct the interview talking about anything but Jeffrey Epstein. So mentions of Clinton, mentions of Dershowitz, mentions of anybody else, they couldn't say it legally because that would be slander.
Mm-hmm.
Because if there was a court case, they could report on the court case. But because that was dropped from the court case, there was simply no way that they could talk about that. And so can you believe, again, Project Veritas and then latterly Alex Jones has actually completely misrepresented that information.
Quite shocking for them. I was going to say there was another piece. I've forgotten what it was, but there was another piece about another publication also having information about Epstein and not being able to publish it. That's
the Vanity Fair piece from 2003.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I was going to say, I've worked in journalism, and if you went to the pub with almost any journalist you choose, and you had some beers with them, and they were sufficiently comfortable that they were off the record.
Yep.
Every journalist has stories that they have, or things that they have wanted to publish, or stories that they have wanted to publish that they have been unable to for legal or ethical reasons.
Yes.
Because, we live in an environment where, quite rightly, mind you, but we live in an environment where you can't just say anything about anyone and not face consequences. And for big media organizations especially, that is a huge consideration all of the time.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm glad you answered that because I had it written down to ask you.
Yeah, no, 100%. I've got stories. I tweeted the other day, I spoke off the record to a property manager in New Zealand about it wasn't about this specific thing, but I spoke to a property manager about something, and during the conversation we had, he referred to what might be referred to as undesirable rental tenants, 2 or 3 times as dregs to me, knowing I was a journalist, but we were off the record, and I was just like, any other time I would want to publish his name because that's some high level fuckery, but I can't because we were off the record. And then there's other times I've had stories that I've wanted to publish, but I can't because I don't want to get sued.
Yeah.
There's things in my book that I had to change because I don't want to get sued.
Yeah, this is entirely it. And so again, this is the point. There's a lot of speculation and stuff like that, but it's not about speculation because all the speculation is plausible. It's about what you can prove and what you can't prove. So just
Yeah.
the final thing is the Pizzagate thing. This was, again, as I said, basically connected to that Wiener's sexting scandal and his laptop, the Podesta emails, tying to tie it in with Pizzagate and Haiti. And it all came from a bloke who did one story and one appearance on InfoWars. He was a chap called Doug Hagman. Now, I'd never heard of this bloke before, but the entire Haiti Clinton sex ring story, it's all completely fabricated. It's all made up from whole cloth. And it all came from this guy, Doug Hagman. And ever since then, Alex Jones has just basically repeated it as a truism, and numerous other people have repeated it as a trope throughout the alternative media. Do I think that the Clintons are squeaky clean? Good God, no.
No.
Like, do I think that Clinton could have been involved in this Epstein thing? Yeah, potentially. He's got form for it, but there's no evidence for it. There's one more thing, and then there's final tie-up, because the interesting thing, there is something really interesting that's come out of this investigation. But I just want to clear something up, because Alex Jones has numerously said that he exposed it in 1999, 2002, 2005, whatever. He was the first person to break the Epstein story. Okay, he's made that, he's abundantly clear that he's the first person in the alternative media ever to mention Epstein with regards to something nefarious and something conspiratorial. He's lying. He's lying. I know this for a number of reasons. The first reason being that basically, according to Knowledge Fight and various other sort of collating sites that I've seen, the first mention that Alex Jones ever made of Jeffrey Epstein was in 2015. 2015.
Wow. It's not even the first time that he was arrested.
No,
No,
there
he's
was.
well late.
He's completely really late. What has been advertised in the alternative media as the first ever time that anyone discussed Jeffrey Epstein was in 2014 with Ed Opperman and John Morrow. And that's actually a really, really good interview. But there is one person in the alternative media that actually had mentioned Jeffrey Epstein as early as 2011. And on 2012, they'd even been on a published media outlet saying that Jeffrey Epstein, that they thought they were a spy. Why did they think they were a spy? Because the Virginia Roberts thing had come out about the honey trap, and suggesting that these rooms were wired for sound. And so this person had noticed this and gone, so hang on, this prominent person who knows the elites, he's moving girls, young girls, across borders into other countries on private jets, and the rooms in which these girls are having sex with elites are wired for sound. And this person had noticed that that's remarkably similar to the testimony of a woman called Christine DiNicola. In 1995, Christine DiNicola was basically given an apology by then President Clinton that as a child she was, this is grim, but essentially she was trained to be a prostitute by members of the CIA as part of a project called Project Artichoke. And the reason that she was being trained to be a prostitute as a child was so that she could be filmed surreptitiously with world leaders and operators of blue chip corporations and movers and shakers in order to blackmail them for the behest of the CIA. And so this person had noted that was remarkably similar. Do you want to know who that person was? It was me, dear listener.
Oh, I was hoping for David Icke.
No, it was Neil Sanders.
It was on the Rich Planet show. And again, I had no idea of the sort of wider plot. All I'd done was because it was being reported that Virginia Roberts had noticed the sweetheart deal and was beginning her lawsuit, and all this strangeness was coming out. I noticed the similarity, and that was it. But I'm sorry, Alex Jones, I'm better than you.
Yeah, but when did you find out about the gay frogs?
Well, this is true. Now, just as the final caveat, because I think that there's lots of stuff that's fishy about this thing, but I think what the interesting aspect of it, and it's very, very quick, is all the evidence that Jeffrey Epstein was either a spy or was somehow connected to intelligence agencies. And there's quite a lot. It's sure you can remember them. He's hired by ex-OSS member Donald Barr at a job that he really shouldn't have. In the 80s, he's claiming to be a CIA agent. He's carrying a concealed weapon. He's getting that riot gun into the UK, and he's got this false Austrian passport with which he's going to places like Saudi Arabia. He's a client of Adnan Khashoggi who's connected to Iran-Contra. The Evening Standard said that he has spook connections all over the world. Stephen Hoffenberg, his disgraced and imprisoned business partner, said that he had traction with the Justice Department. He was needed by the CIA or the FBI for intelligence because he was manipulating the American intelligence for overseas. There's connections to Robert Maxwell, who was rumoured by numerous people to be Mossad. Acosta had said that he belonged to the intelligence and that he was above his pay grade. There's the rumours of honey traps, obviously. There's the setting up of the firm that's intimately connected to the Israeli Defence Force with ex-Prime Minister Eid Barak, Special Forces member Amir Eli, and Panchas Bakras of the IDF. And then finally, there's the actual confession from Mossad member or ex-Mossad member Ari Ben Manash of Mossad, saying that Epstein worked for Mossad and started working with Israeli intelligence, collecting secrets, which doesn't take a massive leap to make that stretch to blackmail secrets, potentially. Again, pure speculation. But I think that's a fascinating aspect of the case. Now, that would explain the cover-ups or the lack of quickness to investigate him and stuff like that. I think, to be quite honest, I just think it's a fascinating aspect that he seems to be rubbing shoulders with so many people that are in intelligence agencies.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? It might also be, it could just as well be that he's a rich asshole
who attracts the attention of people
in intelligence. Like they want to be close to people who are rich assholes. I bet Elon Musk's got some intelligence agency people hanging around him.
Well, he'd need to, because he's got no intelligence of his own. But anyway, so that's the Jeffrey Epstein. Did he kill himself? So where does everybody stand? Because I have to admit, I am still think it's fishy, but I'm erring more towards, if we're going purely on evidence and not speculation, Occam's razor suggests the simplest explanation is he killed himself. But I still think it's fishy. What's your opinion, Dylan?
I came in thinking, honestly, he killed himself. And I think he probably still did. I think it's very possible there's more to the story than we know. And I think this is probably true of a lot of conspiracy theory type things. I think there's more to the story than we know. I don't know that we'll even know any of that stuff. But to my mind, that it's another situation where the conspiracy theory is less about what actually took place and more about making arguments about why the official story isn't real.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, they've overlaid a pattern. Again, this is what happens with a lot of conspiracy theories. We know this has happened before. Whether that's true or not really isn't important. We'll overlay that on the top. And again, I can still completely see why people would be like, oh, come on. Oh, come on. But you take that to a court of law. Like Alex Jones was saying, there's incontrovertible evidence of a cover-up. Any jury in the land would convict, blah, blah, blah. That's simply not true. When you actually look at it, and again, I'll keep reiterating, I am well open to the idea that he's been murdered. I could see it happening. But I want to know who did it, why, when they did it, how they did it, and not just, oh, come on, it's obvious, isn't it? Because it might be, but if it's that obvious, it should be very easy for you to explain how it happened. And if you can't, we can't say that's what happened. So it's a strange one, this one. I think you're right, Dylan. I think there's something weird going off about this. And I think there's elements that maybe will come out in the future, maybe we'll never, ever find out about. But yeah, if we had to make a decision right now with the evidence that we were presented, I think we would actually say, shock, Epstein probably killed himself.
Yeah, that's where I'd land.
Yeah, I think so. If you think about the things we actually sort of mostly kind of know about Epstein, right? So he was a dirty perv, weird pedophile guy who had a lot of connections with people who were very powerful, and we know at least one of those with a very powerful member of the royal family involved some highly inappropriate sexual, connections and arrangements. Then, yeah, it's absolutely plausible that he was a liability for people who might take action to make him not a liability.
Yeah, totally.
I think that part's there's something there that could explain it, but I don't think what's presented makes it any more likely than just he killed himself because he didn't want to deal with those people. Same outcomes.
I'm open to it. It's a plausible thesis. You've got to show me more work than that. Not yourself, Dylan. In the sort of broader thing, because yeah, it could be anybody. It could be the royal family, although they did pay 12 million quid. So, it didn't work if that was the intention. It could be Mossad. It could be US intelligence. It could be someone connected to Trump. It could be someone connected to William Barr. It could be somebody that we've never heard of. It could be Lex Wexner coming back and doing a solid for all those wronged Victoria's Secrets models. It could be someone connected to Ghislaine. There's so many potential possibilities that I'd be inclined to leave the case open, so to speak, and revisit it.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean?
If you were Jeffrey Epstein and you know that any of those people or others that we don't even know about and aren't considering might pose some real danger to you in the future or something like that, then you might choose to
cash your chips.
Yeah, to take that action yourself to prevent the unknown. That's also a possibility. So even if we assume that those things are true and that all of those people are, could presumably be out to get him, that still doesn't mean he didn't do it himself.
Yeah.
Sort of what I'm saying. There was also one other thing I meant to mention because I thought about it. The whole flight log thing, passenger manifest as it often gets called. My favorite thing about that is that it's not a passenger manifest.
Oh?
It's literally a pilot's logbook.
Okay.
It's a pilot's logbook where he scribbles occasional notes about other things, but it's not a manifest. It's not like a legal document that has to list the passengers on the plane.
No, that's
or
true.
Like
it is all scribbled in pencil and stuff, isn't it? So
yeah. So when you say Bill Clinton was on the plane, but the Secret Service wasn't, we don't know the Secret Service wasn't. He just didn't write it down that time.
Could be just an omission from the pilot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a fair point. No, that's a very fair point.
Yeah, people treat it like an absence theory as proof of absence, but it's definitely not.
The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, or whatever it is that they say on the Boondocks. But yes, no, totally, and I think that's the thing. I think we're looking at this. We can see there's something dodgy. There's probably something going on that we have absolutely no idea about. But if we're working with the facts of what we know and not speculation, I think that's the only thing that we can do to be fair to it. Because if we want to find the truth about this, there's no point overlaying these wild theories about ritual sacrifice and eugenics for the elites to an army of Epstein babies or whatever. Like, do you know, it just deters from finding out the truth. Something grim's gone off in this. There's definitely a conspiracy. There's a conspiracy to traffic and exploit women. There's probably a broader conspiracy off the back of that. To use those mechanisms for blackmail. There's enough circumstantial evidence, but we don't know who the clients were. We don't know who the victims were of this. So we need to be sensible with it. Put a pin in it. Go, okay, these are possibilities, but just work with the facts of what we know.
Yeah, there's also another thing that always has bothered me about Epstein conspiracy theoryism, and that is this idea that anyone being photographed with him, anyone in his black book, anyone on the pilot logs,
yes,
is definitely involved in what he was up to. And the thing that always bugs me about that is that his whole trafficking pedophile thing was a secret identity.
Yes,
that was not what he existed as.
No,
and his whole cover identity, if you want to call it that, was being a billionaire playboy who is gonna socialize with other millionaires and high profile people, and is gonna turn up at fancy parties and shit like that, and be photographed with Elon Musk and Donald Trump and Bill Clinton.
Musk always has actually said that the famous shot of him with Ghislaine was he was photobombed. He says he didn't even know the photo had been taken. Whether he's saying the truth or not, who knows? But as you say, that guilt by association is.
It makes no sense in this instance.
Yeah, and again, and people are very, very willing to, like, again, if you're doing guilt by association, look at this picture of him stood next to the Clintons. You can't ignore the connections to Trump. And actually, if you really wanted to sort of put your cards on the table, I'd suggest that there's more dodgy connections to Trump than there are dodgy connections to the Clintons. And again, I'm totally open to the concept that the Clintons were exploited, used, potentially went to the island. Who knows? Like we say, there's no evidence of that. But
I find it less likely, to be honest, with the Clintons than some other people, only for the fact that they were being followed around by the Secret Service all the fucking time. Like, it's not like Bill could be on the plane without the Secret Service, because that's not what the Secret Service allows for.
Yeah, they don't tend to go, all right, Mr. President, we'll nip down to the zoo for the afternoon or whatever, and we'll meet you back at the park at whatever, like 5. Yeah, no, that's a very good point too.
Like, I don't know, I think if you're gonna get yourself involved in illicit sex with minors, you probably don't take federal agents with you.
Yes. I think that's covered it then, basically, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy, that was a lot.
No one else is listening. I wonder if either of you will hear this later. Probably not. I killed Jeffrey Epstein. And JFK.